Hello everyone. This week is Holy Week and what I'm going to do is each day during Holy Week bring you a short reflection from the Bible, and rather than reinventing the wheel, I'm going to be reading from Tom Wright's excellent book Lent for Everyone, based on the Gospel of Matthew. As we're in year A of the Common Worship Lectionary, the Gospel of this year is the Gospel of Matthew. The way this will work is I'll read the passage set for the day in Tom Wright's own translation, and then I will read his reflection, which I hope will be really helpful. So, Monday of Holy Week, reading is Matthew chapter 26, verses 14 to 35. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests. "What will you give me," he said, "to hand him over to you?" They agreed on 30 pieces of silver. From that moment on, he was watching for an opportunity to hand him over. On the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples said to Jesus, "Where do you want us to get the Passover ready for you to eat it?" "Go into the city," he said, "to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is very close. I'm going to keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'" So the disciples did as Jesus had told them and got the Passover ready. When evening came, he settled down with the 12. As they were eating, he said, "I'm telling you the truth, one of you will betray me." They were extremely upset and began to say one by one, "It's not me, is it, Master?" "It's one who's dipped his hand with me in the dish," Jesus replied. "That's the one who will betray me. The Son of Man is on his way, as the Bible said it would happen, but it's misery for the man who hands him over. It would be better for that man if he'd never been born." At this, Judas, who was planning to betray him, said, "It isn't me, is it, teacher?" "You've just said so," he replied. As they were eating, Jesus took some bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to his disciples. "Take it and eat it," he said. "This is my body." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he gave it to them. "Drink this, all of you," he said. "This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. But let me tell you this, I will not drink any more from this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in the kingdom of my Father." They sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, "You're all going to stumble and fall tonight because of me." This is what the Bible says. You see, "I shall strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I'm raised up, I shall go on ahead of you to Galilee." "Even if everyone else trips and falls," said Peter in reply to him, "I'm never going to do that." "I'm telling you the truth," Jesus said to him. "This very night, before the cock has crowed, you will deny me 3 times. "Even if I have to die with you," Peter said to him, "I won't ever deny you." And all the disciples said the same. Well, some of the sharpest, most bitter arguments the church has ever had have been about the meaning of the meal which Jesus shared with his friends the night before he died, and of the similar meals his friends have shared ever since. In the 16th century in particular, these arguments exploded in several directions as Christians accused one another of perverting or even undermining altogether the point and purpose of this meal. That is tragic, of course, but the present passage indicates that we should not, after all, be surprised. The story of Jesus sharing the bread and wine in those 4 brief verses, 26 to 29, is surrounded by the discussion of the betrayal that was about to happen, verses 14 to 16 and 20 to 25, and the warning that all the disciples would abandon him, and that Peter particularly would deny him, verses 30 to 35. Perhaps it is always so. Perhaps whenever something truly and massively important is afoot, it becomes the place where attack is concentrated, where Jesus' friends will be distracted by so many immediate muddles and concerns that they risk missing the glorious thing that stands quietly in the centre, the gleaming diamond in the middle of the rubbish heap. And diamond it is, with many facets, reflecting light all around. This meal, this Passover with a difference, was the way Jesus chose to explain to his followers what his death was all about. They hadn't understood what he'd said to them up to this point, but this meal, and their repeating of it thereafter, would soak it deep down into their imaginations. What you do, and particularly what you eat and drink, changes the way you think and feel. Jesus wanted them and us to know at a level much deeper than mere theory that his death was the true Passover, the time when God acted to rescue his people from slavery once and for all, and that we are not merely spectators but participants and beneficiaries. When we come to the table, as Paul said to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 10:16, we truly share in his body and blood. We are shaped and formed together and individually as Passover people, as rescued from slavery people, as dying with Jesus people. For a community to be formed and shaped in that way is perhaps the most powerful thing that can happen to a group of people. Again, that's why it's so easy to distort it, to allow squabbles and muddles and even betrayals and denials to creep in and spoil it. Sometimes the church has made its sharing of this meal into such a wonderful work of art that everyone is thinking about how clever the art is rather than about how awesome Jesus is. Other Christians have overreacted to this and come to the meal when they have to, almost casually or flippantly, like someone whisking through an art gallery with a cheerful comment about the pretty paintings. We all need, constantly, to find our way back into the heart and meaning of this meal. As Jesus makes clear in verse 29, this meal is the prelude to the coming of the kingdom, which must mean that Jesus himself, and Matthew, in shaping his gospel the way he has, saw his death, interpreted in this Passover fashion, as the final act of kingdom bringing. Certainly that's the implication of verse 18 of chapter 28. Jesus' death is the final overthrow of the powers of darkness, which is why his resurrection then establishes him as the one who has all authority in heaven and on earth. However puzzled we may be, if all this is anywhere near the truth, we should hardly expect to understand such a huge and mysterious thing straight off. However puzzled we may be, we are called to share the meal, to stay focused on Jesus as the rescuer, the kingdom bringer, and so to encourage one another to be kingdom people, to be Jesus people. A prayer for today. Help us, gracious Lord, to come to your table in gratitude and love, that we may be formed into your people and be strengthened in your service. Amen.